were terrified. And I think anyone who tells you otherwise is lying.
But on the inside, it is a roller coaster of emotions.
So I've covered things like shootings, manhunts, and tornadoes. I will say the difference in covering this is now I do fear what I'm bringing home to my family.
It can be super scary sometimes to have to go out into the field.
I'd say at least 80% of them weren't wearing masks. That's the most unsafe that I felt.
My grandmother died of coronavirus about a month ago. I had to watch her funeral over FaceTime.
That's really a stressor on your psyche.
Say bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
I feel guilty. I feel like a bad mom.
I interviewed dozens of journalists from across the country to hear just how much the coronavirus pandemic has changed their lives.
This is a place that never stops working, but not only is New York sidelined, the whole world is sidelined.
We have entire newsrooms with hundreds of people, all focused on this one story.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining in this week. And on this episode of Anchors Away, Sarah and I want to give you an insider look at what it was like to be a journalist when all this COVID-19 madness began. So, to do that, we are bringing on a special guest this week, a friend of ours, Marcus Harun, who is an MSNBC producer, also the creator of the film Essential Journalists: How COVID-19 Changed TV News. And this is going to be more of a behind-the-scenes look at what went into the process of making this documentary, what these journalists and what everybody was going through as we were sitting at home trying to figure it out as well. They were still having to go to work. So we hope you enjoyed the interview. Remember, you could subscribe to Anchors Away on anywhere you listen to podcasts, really. And also, don't forget, please leave us a rating on any of those platforms as well. Really helps us get the word out to get more listeners and also share the message and build our community. So with that being said, here's the episode.
Hello, and thanks for joining us again for Anchors Away. We have a very interesting guest today, and I cannot wait to get started talking to him. Marcus Harun is a producer with MSNBC, and he has come out, developed a documentary called Essential Journalists: How Coronavirus Has Changed TV News. Marcus, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us, where did this idea behind this documentary come from? And we were just speaking beforehand, you've been working on this since March.
Yeah, it has been an amazing process to talk to all these journalists throughout the last few months. I've been working in news for years, and when I realized that this time was definitely something different than anything that I've ever done before, when I was working on my show at MSNBC, and we had our anchor in her apartment building in one state, and I was producing the content in my apartment from another state, and you have the guy running the teleprompter in another state, and it's like, wow, the control room isn't all in one building, the studio isn't all in one building, the camera ops are in another place. They really allowed us to stay safe by staying home. And in news, usually we're heading toward the danger when things happen. We're headed towards the snowstorms, the car crashes, the tornadoes, whatever is going on in the world. And in this case, they actually let us be a part of the public when they told us to stay home. And I was like, this is history. I want to make sure to document this because I don't think there's ever going to be anything like this in my lifetime again. So students can look back on this in the future, journalists can look back on this in the future, but also the general public could realize kind of what journalists are going through as they go to work every day, as they head out into the difficulties of life that everyone's dealing with, but now you need to send broadcasts and tell your story and broadcast from home in some cases. So there were so many changes. I wanted to put it all together, and that's why I came up with the Essential Journalists.
See, the thing is, I think a lot of people aren't going to realize until they watch the video on YouTube here is Marcus is doing this interview in his home with a giant television screen with a bunch of other little screens of other TV stations, of other reporters still doing live shots in their home. And I think for a lot of us, it was the first time that even from my perspective as an outsider now, looking back at it and realizing that, this is a time where people can look inside of reporters' homes and news anchors' homes and see, even if it's a corner of the room, we can see the humanity or the human side of them rather, and also to realize, okay, yeah, there may be a cat that walks across the screen. We get it. That's just kind of the way things are. Talk a little bit about your experience now having to make that switch and then also documenting that switch for so many other people.
So as for the first piece, the journalists and everyone working at home realized that everyone else is at home as well. So aside from the essential workers and the doctors and nurses who had to be outside and had to go to work, there was something to be said about the journalists who are now at home, which are in the same boat as the community that they're serving. So they're at home, they're dealing with the kids that are crying in the other room, they're dealing with the pets, they have their chores to do, they have to take care of elderly parents that they can't visit, they need to talk to them, they need to keep everyone safe in their family, and then they also need to do their job of broadcasting. So everyone else figured out whatever their job was, doing it at home as their companies allowed. But now news is doing the same thing, and one benefit to that is we're serving the public. That is what we do as journalists. So because we're a part of the community, we're reporting on the community, we are also showing that we're a part of it by being at home. Stay home, stay safe is something we were saying. Usually we say stay home and stay safe because of the snowstorm, and we go out and we report in front of the snow, in the middle of the snow, or in front of the tornado. In this case, we said stay home and stay safe, and they actually were at home. So we got a view into their lives. You could see what their homes are like. I think people got a realization that, wow, journalists aren't millionaires even though they're on TV. I think that was a common misconception that people had, where they realized, oh, wow, they live in a small apartment just like I do.
You mean you didn't get into this job for the money too, Marcus?
It's a labor of love for many journalists to get into it because they love what they do. It's the same situation for me. And there's a connection that people made by seeing people at home that are reporting the news while they're at home. And then putting the documentary together, I used a lot of the techniques that you actually see in the documentary, from asking people to shoot things for me via text message, having them send it to me, me asking for them to make a tweak. Hey, can you get this shot? Because as I was reporting on people who are social distancing, I was social distancing myself. And I did talk to 34 reporters from all parts of the country, but I was not about to be getting on a plane or even go out into the field to follow them. Fortunately, I was working with people who had done this every day and were willing and interested in working together. And that's how I was able to get it, by people sending me videos, by doing Zoom calls, by gathering photos, contacting people on Instagram, and kind of shuffled it together in a way that I've never done a project before.
It ended up being a very interesting project. And one part of this is kind of how this is going to change the landscape of TV journalism forever. And one of the people you interviewed is Ellen Crook. She's VP of News for Tegna. And she's talked about this, how it really humanizes and gives the journalist the ability to come into your home, literally, because you're in your own home and you're in other people's homes as well. Do you think that this could possibly change how news is presented in the future?
I think that there will be some solid takeaways from this that will change news as it goes into the future. So, first of all, everyone will be back in studios one day. I'm pretty certain about that. So there should be no worries that studios are empty or that newsrooms are empty. Both will be full again, which is going to be a good thing for morale. It'll be a good thing for the quality of the production and everything. But there will be changes, and those changes I foresee being the positives that we had takeaways from the workflow that we got during the pandemic will last longer. We'll see how many of those, but I see them being things like people realize they could get interviews more simply than ever. The governor, after he sends out an order, even sometimes at 9 or 10 p.m. at night, would sometimes jump on a Skype call if you asked him and you called him in time. Within like 5 minutes of him sending that out, there were times when you could get sources who would be more willing to turn on their camera for 5 minutes after they just sent out the big news to talk to a journalist, to get a Skype call, a FaceTime call, a Zoom call in, to go live on the air via phone or via their laptop. And that way we're able to get to people faster, which is always something we want to do, as opposed to telling them to either drive across the state to a studio, have us drive across the state to get to them with our camera crew. And there's definitely a quality difference where you see the webcams. Just about every guest you see on MSNBC right now is via webcam because we don't have any guests coming into the building, zero. So only staff, and not even many of the staff. It's mostly just a few anchors. A lot of the anchors are at their homes. So there's a quality difference between a webcam guest and a guest sitting across the table from you. But there is an access difference that is a positive, where you are able to get to people sometimes faster and sometimes in a more timely fashion where people really want it and they would like to do that. So I'd say when we're in a pinch, instead of saying, well, cancel the interview, they can't make it in time, why don't we just do it on Skype and then we don't need to miss it? So there's a lot of the learnings that we did where we could kind of do some workarounds as our normal workflow if we need to.
Marcus Harun joining us on Anchors Away this week. He is a producer for MSNBC, also creator of the documentary Essential Journalists. He's got a link for it in the show notes, or you can go to marcusharun.com. I'll give you a plug there. Marcus, talk a little bit about the outside viewer reaction to this, to watching it. I know the documentary's only been out a couple of days, but from anybody you've shown it to, people who have seen it who are outside of the industry, what are their thoughts on it? And I know you touched on a little bit of realizing it, there's a human side to it, that what these reporters are going through, but some of the other thoughts that people have, kind of realizing what is into this documentary.
And tagging on to that real quick, Marcus, journalists, with the landscape right now of the politics that we're in, journalists do get targeted. People have their thoughts and feelings about the media, so-called. And so, adding on to this, what are people saying? Is this an ability to show that, journalists, we're just like everybody else. We're scared of the coronavirus just like everybody else, and we're having to be out there in the middle of it. Just like your policemen and your doctors and nurses and everything else. So can you speak to that as well as what Robert was saying?
That is exactly right. That is the kind of takeaway that I've gotten, which is fantastic. It has been really unfortunate over the last few years to hear the anti-journalism calls that we've heard from all around the world. And then if we are to have something that could bring light what journalists are going through, what they're like, humanizing them a little bit, and having people realize they're dealing with the same things we are. They're literally just bringing us the news. They're sharing information with us, which is what we do as journalists. And there's not this alternative agenda that people think that there is for some reason. If people can get a positive takeaway like that from this documentary, that is amazing. And I have heard that from a few people where they are seeing this, where you're shedding light in an area where there previously wasn't. The reporters are the ones who are always bringing the stories to us of other people. But I didn't see anyone who was sharing the stories of the journalists. And that's why I put this together, because we are people as well. We're not only just the faces you see on TV or the people who are writing the words that you see on TV. We're also people who have other challenges. Of course, there should be documentaries made about the doctors and the nurses. Of course, there are documentaries that should be made about other essential workers, but this is my niche and an area that so far I've gotten some great feedback, including, I think my favorite was from journalists who work in the business and they actually didn't realize what other journalists in other roles or in other parts of the country were dealing with. And I was like, wow, this is amazing that even the people that are experts in the area are realizing there's more to the story and more to what they're going through than what they individually are going through. So to have some good news coming from the front of the viewers and good news from journalists who are taking a look at it. I'm very happy with the reaction so far.
So my question for you would be, you've been working on this for months, and making a documentary is no easy task. I mean, making a 3-minute story is no easy task, but you went above and beyond that. For you, what did you learn throughout all of this? Whether it's either what did you learn about yourself, or what did you learn about the industry, or about other reporters? What did you personally take out of this in terms of growth and education?
I'd say 2 pieces. The first one is how the journalists all across the country were in the same boat, but they came up with different solutions. It was fascinating to see, as I talked to different people, that no matter what market you were in, if you were in a small market with a small viewership number in the middle of the country, or if you were in one of the big cities in the country and you're reporting to more than 1 million people, everyone's dealing with the same thing. They had lockdowns. They couldn't go out. They couldn't get the interviews they wanted. They had to stand far away from interviewees. Sometimes the interviews wouldn't come out of their house. All the same issues they're dealing with. What type of cardboard box could I use to prop up my laptop appropriately? What kind of hockey stick or pole or light stand can I use to make my boom pole? And it wasn't the journalism leaders, it wasn't the news directors, and it wasn't corporate giving you direction of, here's the rule book for what you should do during this pandemic, because there is no rule book. It was every journalist for themselves figuring it out. And that was fascinating, because when you watch on TV, I think a lot of people are imagining their bosses or someone very smart came up with a plan of how they could use this person's webcam. They'll use a double box with this person on the other side of the screen in the studio. How do you talk back and forth? How do you use a teleprompter when you're at home? How do you have lighting? A lot of the reporters and journalists figured that out on their own, I found out. It wasn't, people weren't giving them much direction. So either people who were just out of college who kind of actually had a little leg up in this situation because they did a lot of their own home broadcasting or YouTube broadcasting or TikTok broadcasting or whatever they were doing where they had some skills.
It's so weird to hear that, by the way, TikTok broadcasting. Sorry.
Or people have been in the business for years. I talked to someone who's in the business for at least 35 years, and she had to broadcast at home, and she really was wondering, what do I do? And what do I do with this technology that other people usually handle it, but now you're at home, you have to do it. So there's ingenuity and innovation on the part of everyone and all the journalists. The other thing I learned, and this is what I just shared, I spoke at the National College Media Convention. I always enjoy talking to young journalists and inspiring those who want to get into the business, that you really have the skills to do everything on your own, and you can just do it. If every journalist from the network, if Lester Holt is anchoring from his house and he has to turn on his own equipment every day and figure it out for NBC Nightly News, and if the small market people are doing everything on their own, if you're a student and you want to say, I don't know how to get noticed, I don't know how to get into this business, I don't know, I need a job or an internship to do that, it's not true. Any journalist, anyone who calls themselves an aspiring journalist is actually a journalist if you just tell a story. Use your laptop that you have for school, use your phone that you have, and you can make a documentary that is at the level of what you just watched of my documentary. It was made on my laptop at home, it was made on my phone, and I texted and called and emailed people. Everyone has that ability. You can do that for a 2-minute package, you could do it for a documentary, you could do it for a blog or a podcast or an Instagram page. Whatever you want to do, it opens it up and it shows that these tools are being used at the network level and they can be used in your college dorm room. You can tell the story.
Marcus, we appreciate your time. We are so excited to be able to present this, especially to those in the industry who listen to the podcast, because I do think it's so important to also see that journalists are on the front lines as well and putting themselves out there and doing the best that they can. So we really appreciate your time. Again, as Robert said, Marcus Harun, producer for MSNBC and creator of Essential Journalists, a documentary on journalists being out there on the front lines and what it's been like since March. And it's on YouTube, and we'll have the link as well.
Fantastic. EssentialJournalists.com is the easiest way to find it, and it's available for free, and I'd be happy if you checked it out. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Marcus. We appreciate you. And as for Sarah and I, we'll be right back after the break. All right, we do want to thank our sponsor for this show, Anchor. It's the easiest way for us to bring you the podcast. They give us everything we need. It's all in one place. And most importantly, it's all free. Everything on our iPhones, on our iPads, on our computers, all the creation tools to edit, it's all included, and they distribute the show for us. Send it to Spotify, send it to Apple, send it to Google. So you can start your own podcast, get in on the game, download the Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm to get started. All right, we hope you enjoyed the past 20 minutes or so. Remember, you can find myself at Robert Burns TV on any of the social media platforms. Also, you can find Sarah, Sarah Threadgill News or Sarah Threadgill Media on either Facebook or Instagram. Send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Other than that, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.